it. That's what I'm talking about.
Wait. Okay, now, from the beginning.
Hit it, boys.
Welcome to Advancement Amplify, the IA MarCom Shift, a new 5-part pulse check series from Enrollify. I'm Dan Giroux, a higher education marketing communications leader focused on elevating the strategic impact of advancement teams. In this follow-up to Advancement Amplify AI for IA, we're zooming out to explore how advancement marketing communications teams can evolve from reactive, service-oriented roles into more strategic drivers of engagement and philanthropic growth. Through candid conversations with senior practitioners, consultants, and thought leaders, we'll unpack topics like organizational structure, smarter success measures, advanced technology integration, and in-house campaign storytelling amid heightened financial scrutiny and growing pressure to deliver meaningful ROI. Let's dive into today's episode.
Now let's get into our first question. I'm going to start this with you, Melissa, but Shanna, please feel free to jump in as well. What's the biggest talent challenge you're hearing from advancement leaders right now?
Yeah, I'm happy to kick off here. As we enter this next fiscal year, our leaders in the industry are having a real challenge in thinking about how to use fiscal resources to shape their organization, both short and long term. Higher education is faced with this broadly, but in thinking about how to spend those effectively programmatically from an FTE standpoint, and both invest in not only searches, but also in making sure that their people, right, are having good, successful careers. And that really impacts how and when they launch searches. So we're trying to meet people where they are. That doesn't just mean launching a search, but if they need short-term talent solutions, if that's an interim placement, if that's on-demand project support, or if that's a long-term search strategy. And so that's how we're helping leaders today. But I think that fiscal uncertainty is really what the biggest talent challenge is right now.
Shanna?
The fiscal uncertainty is certainly across the board. I mean, this is, how many more times can we say this is an uncertain time, unprecedented times? And I think leaders are so overwhelmed with competing priorities and how to make all of these things work and keep achieving their goals that there's a real interest in developing and retaining team members, but it's being deprioritized along the way of the other expectations that they have. And I think that's the challenge, is how do we help create space for the things that are very important, but not necessarily as urgent as everything else that they're facing.
Melissa, I'd love to jump back to searches. I know that volume ebbs and flows throughout the course of the year, but what changes might you be seeing when it comes to the types of roles being created or compensation trends? I know you hinted at that there's interims and fractional, perhaps, roles that are starting to become a little bit more of a solution for teams. What's been different in the past 12 months than you might have seen in the last 2 to 3 years before that?
We are seeing a huge increase in specialization. We're seeing a huge increase in people that have kind of multi-channel strategy, digital engagement, content experts, engagement specialists, right? People are getting really much more specialized in those fields. What I think we will see even more of is people that are now going to have hybrid, right? Where they are able to come to the table with multiple specializations and use those in a cross-functional storytelling manner. And that's going to then add on with the AI components or things where institutions will not have to use resources to outsource then at that point. So ways where we can optimize budgets and fiscal prioritization to bring some of those things back in-house.
And Shanna, on your end, have you noticed any trends that are particularly pressing or emerging in the past year?
I think the most important thing that I'm recommending to advancement VPs right now is consistency in whatever that means. When things are so uncertain, what remains consistent, and how do we apply that to all of our teams and not just part of it? Melissa was talking about the impact of hybrid on our work. And, post-COVID, there was this push to do things differently than we'd ever done in our profession and think about being hybrid or remote, which we had learned that we could do. And now there is this really fast move back to only in the office, maybe one day a week at home. And I think that this is a challenge when it's not being applied consistently, because it's creating challenges with morale and also equity issues. And if our goal is to recruit and retain the very best possible people, then what can we do to create the kind of flexibility that allows them to do that kind of specialization and amazing work that they're best equipped to do, like Melissa's talking about? Mm-hmm. I think this also comes back to urgent and important. Right now, we have so many decisions that we have to make at all times, and we can't make every one of them the way we might like to. And so what are we prioritizing? And as a result, what are we deprioritizing or under prioritizing? And what I would love to see is us continuing to experiment and lead the way in our profession about how we can do things a little bit differently and not regress back to the way we've always done things, because this is so amazing that we are able to try new strategies and evolve our wonderful profession.
Shanna, the urgent versus important dilemma is something that I certainly had to contend with when I was in-house. Do you have a framework or two, perhaps, that you utilize with the teams and leaders that you work with for, how do you pick and choose the right investments? And doesn't mean that you can't pursue the other opportunities, but perhaps it's, not now instead of just no.
Yes. Well, one of my favorite things to do is to break out those wall Post-it notes with an advancement executive team and start to really chart out, okay, what are we doing right now? What do we need to do next? And what are the things that we're not doing that we really need to focus on? And that I use, you can use the, based on the Eisenhower matrix. I talk about it in similar ways, what's important and what's not urgent. And often what falls into that category is our people and our own personal and professional development. And so when you can make it very visible with an executive team, of course, they want to prioritize those things. But then it's about what is the minimum viable progress that we can make in order to achieve our goals, rather than thinking about everything we might want to do. And I find that teams resonate with that because it feels more attainable. It's not taking the ultimate step, it's taking one step. And it's also saying, how are we going to carve this out in our executive team meetings? What is the one thing that we can do right now to help advance our teams? But it helps to make it visible, Dan, when you're creating that kind of framework, because otherwise it's just a nice to have in the back of our minds.
I've seen different roles dedicated to supporting that ongoing talent development. And of course, it can vary based on the size of an advancement division. But can you unpack a little bit where you've tended to see ownership for that continued learning and professional development, education of staff? How can and are leaders trying to make that a dedicated, consistent part of the enterprise?
So I think there's certainly some teams who have done a great job in building out an entire learning and development function within advancement. And I respect that they have been able to prioritize that both with budget and time. That's not feasible for every organization. And that doesn't mean that these kinds of goals are not attainable. What I really think happens best is whether or not you have a dedicated team is that these conversations take place at the executive team table, because this is not something that we can outsource, even if we have staff who are dedicated to it. If we start to think that it's someone else's job, then we're really missing the opportunity to create culture at the highest level.
Great segue. I'm going to kick that to Melissa. You have an opportunity to help out with senior level marketing communication searches, both for central functions as well as advancement functions. And I'd say in many cases in the central function, on that leadership, that executive table, the most senior marketing communication lead does sit, not always, but often. And I think that's been a trend over the last few years is more and more. I don't think that's always the case in advancement. And could you maybe compare and contrast how you see the embrace of marketing communication from a central division versus perhaps more traditionally how that's housed within advancement divisions?
So what I'll say first is that no two universities are alike, right? This is every institution is different in some ways, right? So one of the things that we do is we just accept whatever way we receive the institution's model. What I think is most important is that when we come to an advancement marketing and communications search or working with a leadership team, is that we're ensuring that organization is accepted and respected for the quality and the content expertise that they're bringing to the table, and that there is clear lines of communication and an understanding of mission in both ways. And unpacking that, right? Where are the opportunities and where are the challenges in that? And how do we help to address that in this next search? Where I find the biggest challenge, regardless of the organizational model, is when the pendulum is swung completely in one direction or the other, right? So either an entirely centralized organization or an entirely decentralized organization, because that's where it's challenging to serve the audience. So Dan, to answer your question, I find that when there are advancement communications staff that are embedded in the organization with some kind of dotted or collaborative relationship to central and vice versa, that seems to serve all parties the best. But again, regardless of the model, it's that kind of important, healthy relationship that serves the institution and its mission the best.
I'd like to dive a little bit deeper into that, Melissa. One of the questions that I often get asked is, what is the optimal model? And I agree with your prior statement that there isn't a one-size-fits-all approach, but you've got advancement marketing communication professionals embedded in advancement. You sometimes have them embedded in a central university marketing communication function supporting advancement. You might have sort of dedicated pod, a little bit of a hybrid version where there's dual dotted lines. And I've seen a couple of those positions over the last year or two emerge. And I think a lot there must be predicated on the two senior vice presidents or vice presidents have a really great relationship and shared vision, right, for that role. So it's not everything will work everywhere. But if you could, just unpack a little bit more around some of the structures that you see institutions trying to either perpetuate or maybe experiment with.
Yeah, I mean, again, if I were able to design my own organization, it would be that dotted line in both direction, right? But that does, at that C-suite highest level of the organization, require senior leadership to really buy into this cultural collaborative nature, right? That the institution's best interest is at heart. The prioritization of projects and resources is what's key there. When we see challenges in the organization, it's because there is not a clear path set against the strategic plan of what gets the attention from the marketing and communications team, right? And that's where the stressors come in. So oftentimes when we come in and do a couple days of assessment on campus, one of the core agenda items for the next leader to address is how do we get our arms wrapped around prioritization of institutional items, right? What do we start with? How do we anchor those to the strategic plan? How do we anchor those to the next institutional agenda, whether it be enrollment or advancement or campaigning or branding, website redesign, etc. And you can layer that across any audience. Again, if you're asking me, I think that a dotted line in each direction where there is clear partnership and buy-in at the cabinet level, the university cabinet level, and that's a deep cultural commitment.
I would add to that, Melissa, that in addition to that being a deep cultural commitment, it's also about deep trust and respect of the individual roles. And you were alluding to this earlier, that when that unique expertise is respected and honored, then anything really feels possible, because it's less about the work and it's more about that mindset and that trust. And with that trust comes a little bit more space and authority in decision making. And it also creates a better flow of communication. And all of those things contribute both to the success of the individual leader, but the culture of the organization.
You both kind of hinted at, I think, there can be triggers, right? Campaign preparation and gearing up for that is often an opportunity to take a step back, or concluding a campaign and then looking at how we've changed as an organization. How do we want to look moving forward? Right now, there's a lot of uncertainty, as you noted earlier, Melissa, around financials. And if institutions haven't been forced to reckon with that because of maybe enrollment numbers that have missed the mark, I think it's on the horizon for many. So there are hiring freezes, there are reductions. Not trying to paint an overly negative light, but what are some of those both positive and negative, or neutral, I guess, triggers that you're seeing be that moment, that opportunity for the senior leaders to say, how do we want this to work differently moving forward?
I mean, I think we've been placed in this situation right now without intention, we're not proactively necessarily doing that. I think reactively right now we are being required to be able to make these kinds of decisions and play out different scenarios and different, second options, plan A, B, C, and D. And I think that is challenging, because when we make those kinds of decisions under stress or duress, everything feels more heightened than if this isn't an exercise anymore. It's the reality of what's happening in our organizations. Is what can we do with less? What do we do with different budget? How are we allocating and how are we aligning with the next few months and years the way we anticipate them?
I think everyone is approaching this completely differently, right? So I've had a couple of clients do different things. And again, they have days, if not, maybe a couple of weeks to make quick decisions given the situation. Some have lost their marketing budgets altogether, right? And resource shifts. And some had chief marketing officer positions open. So how do you hire a chief marketing officer position with absolutely no budget to do anything of creative intent, right? Some are using the salary savings over this next year to outsource those key pieces to keep the institution moving forward. And so that's their strategy. Some are folding marketing back under enrollment or advancement in the short term, right? Some are sitting tight to see what this looks like in the short term. And some are merging, right? Responsibilities. I don't know that there's a one size fits all. I think people are coming together as teams and trying to figure out how to navigate this in the same way that we've done over the last couple of years and other unanticipated major change. And we'll get through this one too, but it's going to take creativity, and it's going to take kind of fellowship, right? In many ways, where we're going to figure it out.
I think change management is such an ever-present aspect of the work now, but I don't know that divisions and organizations are all that well prepared for how to do it. So I'm curious to hear from Shanna. You're probably involved in a lot of change management work and providing guidance on transformative moments for advancement divisions. How are you seeing leaders better prepare for change that's needed now or change that's on the horizon? Do they bring in consultants? Do they create a position and imbue that with a certain level of authority and responsibility?
Oftentimes I'm brought in to do strategic advisory for the overall department and executive team. And this is one piece of the work that we're doing alongside with moving forward all the other really important priorities. in the university or college. And what I think is really powerful is, to Melissa's point about fellowship, is this idea that we have the capacity internally to create strategies and answers. And if you're bringing in an external partner, whether me or another consultant, it's not to replace the team capacity, it's to extend the team capacity. It's to provide a more objective sounding board, insight from other institutions, because as Melissa said, not one institution is doing things exactly the same. So what can we learn from others? Where is that intel coming from? I think it helps because I have been in the seat leading advancement teams and understanding what those unique challenges are, but also applying the cultural strengths of the institution rather than trying to be something they're not. What are the strengths of this institution and how can we apply those to the decisions that we're making as a team?
Dan, one of the things that I always encourage search committees to do is when we're in an interview, we want to ask behavioral-based interview questions, right? And what that gets at is really understanding how a leader approaches a challenging situation, right? How they apply those knowledge, skills, and abilities. And so we're listening for examples. Search committees often want to hear about a proudest moment, right? Or a big achievement. What's most important is when a leader fails and how they recover from that failure, right? And so to simplify it, when you fell and you skinned your knee, right? Who was around? Who helped you get back up? Was it the person you anticipated? What did you learn from that? Right? Was it what you anticipated? How do you recover? What was that long-term lesson? Right? What was your shortcoming in that? And a lot of that is what we learn from them as far as their change management strategy. How did they help the organization along then? What was their growth moment? So it's that failure lesson that often helps us to understand how someone leads effectively in the short and the long term. And that's really helpful in understanding how someone kind of can come to an organization and help them get through their own moments of challenge.
I might have to borrow that. I wrote an article for Harvard Business Review about the 5 qualities to look for in a new hire. And a related question to that I really enjoy asking in interviews is, tell me about a time you pursued a work project that others didn't believe would be possible, or that others had said, we've tried that before and it didn't work here. And I think in a similar vein to what you're looking for in that question is about what did I learn from the challenge and who was with me and who did I bring with me? It's also about how were you able to create possibility and opportunity when others said it wasn't possible? Because one of the very best things I think about working in higher education and advancement is that we believe in what's possible even when others don't.
When you happen to have an in-house team where it has gone through a lot of change over the years and they're asked to get ready, it's going to be an even tougher road ahead. How do you keep them inspired, engaged, instead of sort of resigning to, well, of course, why wouldn't it be, getting harder here? So I think you have a lot of marketing communication professionals in advancement divisions that are no stranger to dealing with challenge on a day-to-day basis. But when you start to pile that onto, it's been 7 years of that or 12 years of that, how do you keep them energized and willing to go to battle?
I mean, you have to have fun. You have to have a workplace that people want to be a part of. Dan, you had asked earlier about hybrid work models, etc. And institutions are coming at that now. That we've been a couple years post-COVID in different ways. But I commend institutions that are allowing employees some agency to still choose, right? Some employees want to go back into the office. Some want some more flexibility. It is still a buyer's market. If I reach out to someone and they ask if there's flexibility to have a hybrid, or some kind of, they can decline the offer and just say, I am not interested if it is a 5-day work week. And there is nothing I can do about that, nor am I going to try to change their mind, because that is an important component of their happiness in their day-to-day life. I don't want someone to take a job and then it not be fulfilling in their personal life. It is too important that is a 50-50 blend.
Amen to that. Thank you. Who we are at work is also who we are at home, and it is all the same. We learned that from COVID. And so in addition to having fun and feeling supported in who you are personally and professionally, what are you going to help me learn in this organization? Because it can be challenging, and I can be creative, and I can dig deep, and I want to feel valued, and I want to feel like I am learning here. And so the two things I'd add to what Melissa said are about encouraging a culture of recognition and appreciation at every level in the organization, and also about encouraging learning and showcasing learning and investing in learning, because people will build their resilience when they feel that they are being valued and also feel like they have the opportunity to grow.
I think that's a great lead into the next segment I want to hit, which is key roles. So in an environment right now where not a lot of institutions are perhaps being able to add FTEs or rethink their org structures more creatively, and you've got existing team members in certain kind of roles. And going back to your point earlier on, Melissa, trying to find a balance between having maybe some generalists, but also leaning in the direction of more specialists. What are those opportunities to approach upskilling existing staff, or exploring and integrating AI practices into the work? How are you seeing maybe job descriptions around advancement and advancement marketing communications specifically start to change? Or I think we've all attended conferences where we're seeing artificial intelligence be an integral component. So yeah, what are some of the examples where you saw a job description or heard an advancement leader perhaps and said, that's a really interesting way and creative way to look at how to get there if your existing FTEs are perhaps a little bit, more restricted?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, so I just attended the case summit, and this was a huge pillar of category for the sessions, and I was excited to attend all of them to get up to date on what was happening. The vice presidents in the room were also very excited, and it was interesting to see the attendees raise their hand to say number one priority in understanding kind of what's out there and what we can do more of, and also what I'm using is ChatGPT to help craft statements and letters and things as a starting point. There is so much excitement in finding leaders that can help get one's arms wrapped around this. There is not enough investment yet in creating positions that are dedicated to it. What we're seeing, though, is every interview asks, what are you doing? Right? So I think we need to have the investment piece of it, right? I don't think it's a chief AI officer, although we're seeing that in higher education. I don't think we're kind of there yet in advancement. But I do think minimally it's starting to invest in maybe what employees in the organization are interested in starting to upskill in this area. Can we find some champions, right, that have some interest? And maybe they're then your group that says, hey, it's not so scary, right? That peer influence group can be really magical for those that are a little bit more hesitant with it. And then maybe at some point there is a position with an advancement. But I do think this is the next level. And then we're beyond, okay, it's just to start as a foundational point for a research report or for a stewardship letter or for something like that. I think there's also a little bit fear baked in that AI may reduce headcount. I don't see it that way. I see it as a help to add to and optimize organizations. So again, some of this might be change management. Some of this might be reducing concern around just a new tool in the industry.
I think that the understanding how AI fits into the many tools that we have at our disposal and how to use them well. We often talk about what is my best and highest use of time as a leader, and how can AI contribute to that as a tool. And I think that is something that we're still exploring. I've seen at least one vice president put that into the executive team goals for this year to make recommendations on how to better use this tool. And I think that's really interesting because it's going to not just require us to test things, but it's going to require us to have data to show for what we've done and what we've learned. And we'll look forward to seeing how that goes over the next, 11 months of the fiscal year.
Melissa, one of the topics connected to artificial intelligence that has started to emerge is the concept of digital staffing, right? So if you don't have the resources to hire humans and pay them their salary plus full fringe and everything, could this help fill a gap? And again, not replace, but work alongside advancement professionals and helping them do the work that they're doing, extend capacity and so forth. Do you have a perspective on that in terms of being a future viable approach for organizations, or is it still a little too far away from what you're hearing from everyday leaders looking to fill roles?
You're referring to the AI stewardship officers that make kind of Zoom calls to donors?
Yeah, version 2 AI is probably at the forefront of autonomous AI, but virtual engagement officers, virtual giving officers, virtual stewardship officers. Exactly.
I might be a little bit more of a traditionalist, right? It's very interesting technology. And I come from advancement, right? In my early career. I think that is, for me, that's the difference, right? We still need that warm body. We still need that stewardship, that engagement point. For me, that doesn't get replaced. AI as a tool for making that personal connection easier, I think will change how we do business. AI to replace a human in advancement, I'm not there. I believe so much in the mission of what advancement does and the importance of that connection and that trust that we build with donors.
I'd love to see us think about how to have AI help us do our jobs better so that we can use our unique strengths to do the things that only we can do, rather than think about it as replacing or extending staff. And I mean this when we go back to the people aspect of the work that we started with. What can AI take on so that leaders can show up differently for their teams and be there in the in-between moments and recognize someone instead of thinking that they have to write back 14 emails? I think that's really where we can use this to make a keen difference in reinforcing the important mission that we serve and the important work that we do.
I am particularly interested to see with institutions where budgets are being frozen, headcount hiring is being frozen for the time being, if that might spur more to take a look at this type of technology and say, well, we can't hire a person, but now might be a good time to invest X amount of $1,000 to see if this is something that's actually viable for us. Again, not to replace somebody, but if we have 4 people doing this job and we add this technology and that helps us scale to be able to do the work of 6 people, that's a pretty compelling value proposition, I think, for leaders. So I know it's a growing topic at conferences, and there are now several dozen institutions that are involved in trialing these different autonomous AI products, but still very much an early game here. A lot more to learn, a lot more to technologies to come out and support us. We've talked about some disruptions like artificial intelligence, and a few years before that, it was COVID, right? These big disruptions that have forced institutions as a whole, but also, of course, specifically advancement divisions, how to do their work differently. What are some of the practices that advancement leaders and marketing communication professionals can adopt or embrace that can help them keep up with what's feeling like a culture of continuous change? Like one that embraces that as opposed to fearing it.
I think it comes back to being willing to learn and make mistakes and explore different ways of doing things than we've done before. The growth mindset is going to help build resilience, and it's going to help us with being more adaptable. And I think leaders at every level in the organization would benefit from this kind of training and coaching because it's not going to change for us. We already have seen things that have required us to do things differently and stretch ourselves. And so continuing to invest in what does it mean to be a leader today? How can I help my staff be the most adaptable and create new possibilities when there are a lot of barriers to our success?
I think it's wonderful when leaders ask their staff, how are you feeling? What's giving you angst? What should we be doing better? How can I be more supportive, right? That back and forth versus a leader feeling like they're taking on all the pressure to make people feel more comfortable in a challenging time. That creates a really wonderful culture and gives people an opportunity to have a voice, especially during hard times like this.
Shanna, are there any systems that you particularly embrace in your work that can help advancement divisions and leaders with sort of, again, leaning into and harnessing the opportunity that disruption can create?
Well, it's not necessarily exactly about disruption, but I do really encourage team leaders to have stay conversations with their employees. And Melissa, you were referring to this earlier about asking directly rather than trying to guess what someone needs. And this can happen at a team level with a skip level meeting, or it could happen in an individual stay conversation. But asking questions about what will it take to retain you? What are the things that energize you? What is one change that you would make if you had a magic wand? What is one thing you would say to the university president about what we're doing in advancement that they may not know? I mean, having a real, true conversation about where we are as a group, where we are individually, I think is going to better position us for what is ahead, because we'll understand more about each other, we'll show compassion to each other, and we'll create new ideas as a result.
I don't think anyone goes around asking to decelerate change, but certainly how to navigate it, or in some cases maybe accelerate it. And I think that's where consultants, marketing agencies, fractional talent can be interesting tools for leaders to explore and maybe try it without as much risk or commitment than hiring a full-time person might be. Melissa, I'll kick this to you, but I'm sure, Shanna, you've seen a lot of this as well. Is what are some of those thoughts that are going through senior leaders' heads when deciding, do I hire a person? Do I bring in an agency? Do I do both? What are the factors that are often weighed, and how do they tend to approach those types of decisions? Put us in the mind frame of a senior leader trying to decide how to get at a solution for an important challenge.
Yeah. So I think when I meet with a leader and we kind of think through what it is they're trying to solve, one One is what's the timeline, right, on what it is you're trying to solve? Is this a long-term thing? What's the institution's appetite for this challenge? Is this project based? Is it going to be cyclical, et cetera? So that then we can think about, is this a search where the placement is going to be part of your organization for the next at least 5 years? Is this something where you might want to bring in an interim leader and they're going to be there a year or two? Is this a short term? Maybe it's 6 months or 9 months or 3 months, right? And then we can think about how is this person going to come to the table? What kind of impact can they have? And we can craft a talent strategy and placement that makes the most sense for the organization and do that quickly, right? It doesn't have to be a one-size-fits-all approach to ensuring that we get the right person to the organization at the right moment, right? And it's actually more effective if we do that work on the front end than jump into a, let's say, search and then realize that what we're searching for is not actually what the organization needs.
I'll build on that to say, once you've done that really thoughtful and intentional planning process with Melissa about what do we need and how are we going to position our organization and this person for success, is what happens next. So in the Bold Blueprint research study that my firm and I led, two of the things that really just stay with me all the time that we found were that external hires, and this was specific to women chief advancement executives, but I think it can be applicable to any leader. External hires faced a much steeper transition. They had different team dynamics they had to deal with. They reported colleagues not really understanding what it means to do this work in advancement, pressure to meet ambitious fundraising goals, and less support to do that. And less support really shows up as onboarding. In our findings, more than 70% of the women chief advancement executives did not have any support or professional development in their onboarding for 6 to 12 months. And so once we've made this thoughtful plan about, okay, we need this person, it's more than, and I know you'd feel this way too, Melissa, it's more than just what happens when that person gets into the seat. It's what happens with them when they walk down the hall, when they go into those team meetings, when they're sitting at the president's cabinet. And I think this full arc is something that we have an opportunity to do better and more intentionally in our profession.
It's such a good point. I always say, especially with an external hire, but it happens internally too. If someone's promoted into a position, you have to champion that hire from day one. You have to walk around and say, I am so excited that this person is now in this leadership role because I believe in them and they are going to take this organization to the next level. And I'm excited to introduce them to you, and, full faith. And that's a year of commitment. That's not, here's your office and a legal pad and pen and computer and off you go. It's a full year of positioning them with the right people in the right moments with your full backing. And that's the sink or swim. And that's where people will feel really accepted and excited to stay.
Well, Melissa and Shanna, I want to thank you. We're running out of time here. So I'd love to actually, Shanna, take your bold move framework and ask you both a question, which is, when you look at the next 6 to 12 months for where higher education is continuing to head, what's one bold move that you believe advancement leaders could and should be making as it relates to, and this is where I get to be selfish, their marketing and communication functions?
Love it. Always here for the bold move framework, Dan. I would say, regardless of function, right? MarCom, advancement, all of the above. The bold move is to invest in your team dynamics and leadership, particularly in your middle managers. They are the culture carriers. They are the community bearers, and they are the change accelerators for our profession.
I would say content storytellers, do not outsource that. invest in your internal staff, find people that are fully committed to the institution and can tell those stories with passion, authenticity, and commitment.
Shanna, Melissa, thank you so much for sharing your insights. Organizing and staffing for impact is a big and complex topic. There are many different avenues you can go down, as we've tried to do a little bit here and there with things like trends and structure and creating the right kind of culture that can navigate change. We'll get some resources from the both of you, including the show notes for listeners for this episode. So let's connect afterward on that. And then I want to be sure to remind our listeners to tune in again next Thursday as we tackle mastering the collaboration matrix. So how do advancement marketing communication partners not just support advancement, but work across central marketing communications, across admissions or enrollment, schools, units, institutes, and beyond to help amplify impact? So thank you very much for joining us. I'm Dan Giroux, and this is Advancement Amplified, reminding you to make it matter.
The Higher Ed Pulse is part of the Enrollify Podcast Network. If you like this podcast, chances are you'll like other Enrollify shows too. Our podcast network is growing by the month, and we've got a plethora of marketing, enrollment, and higher ed technology shows that are jam-packed with stories, ideas, and frameworks, all designed to empower you to be a better higher ed professional. Our show helps higher ed marketers and admission pros find their next big idea and features a selection of the industry's best as your hosts. Learn from Brian Gross, Eddie Francis, Jenny Lee Fowler, and so many of your favorite leaders in higher ed. Enrollify is made possible by Element 451, the next generation AI student engagement platform, helping institutions create meaningful and personalized interactions with students. Learn more at element451.com.